Well, good day. I am so excited about this episode because I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks and do's and don'ts to help you along your way learning to forage, which is something I love. It brings me so much joy. And if I can share some tips to help you feel a bit more confident to grow that knowledge base and to develop the skill of foraging, then I think that's just awesome. Before I get into all the tips and tricks though, I'm going to take you on a little adventure of foraging with my mom, mushroom picking, that was really fun, and then I'm going to make a special announcement about a new addition to the channel. So without further ado, here we go. So we are headed out into the backwoods to go morel picking again, and this time I have a basket. I bought the basket actually to store all of Frank's toys, so he has access to his toys, and it's just nicer than a cardboard box. But then it doubles as my foraging basket, so when I want to go foraging, I dump his toys, and the rest of the time, which is most of the time, I'm not actually foraging, it will be his toy basket. So I got my knife for mushrooms, and then I just have Frank's leash strapped to it, so I don't have to hold it, because then I also have his leash with me, which is just a good idea always, because you never know what you'll encounter, and if I'll need to put him on a leash, better safe than sorry. Anyways, mushroom picking. Look, here's a mushroom. We're literally just on our way to the patch, and I found the first one of the day. Look at this. Boop. First mushroom ever in my basket. Are you having a good time mushroom picking, Frank?
Oh, yes, we are. I see them.
Yeah, we have hit the money. We are off to a good start. Are you finding mushrooms over there?
Yes, I am.
Is it super exciting?
Yes, it is.
This one. Yay, a mushroom. Every mushroom is so exciting. Yeah, this is a good spot right here. I'm up to 10 within a couple feet of each other. Do I see any more? Hi, Alice. Hi. Oh, are you congratulating me for finding the mushrooms? Look it. You smell and then go find them. Bark when you see them, okay? You bark when you see them. Wow. Whoa, you think you have more than me so far? Holy moly. We're doing good. We've just started. I spotted these. Look at that, right there. I spotted them from over there. You really develop an eye for it. Do you see the mushroom? It's right there. Yep, that's what we're working with. And there's Frank just laying central while me and my mom walk circles with our heads down looking for mushrooms. It's a good old dog activity if you're close to a patch. You want to show me what you got? Nice. I got like 2/3 of a basket. I'm proud of that.
Oh, combine that basket with
Yeah,
the
we
overflowing.
have an overflowing basket. That was such a successful mushroom picking mission. I got almost a full basket. It was so much fun. There's definitely more out there. And the weather conditions are such that there will be more to come. But I love that I can hang my knife on the basket. It's probably like more than 2 pounds of mushrooms. So we are going to be feasting well. In theory, I could sell them. I could maybe make $15 for this. But to buy this many mushrooms would be well over 100. So I would rather just enjoy eating them. Enjoy some rich people food that I wouldn't be able to afford on my own, but I can thoroughly enjoy because of my own skill set. Also, I just want to say that there is no right or wrong foraging attire. I'm in a t-shirt and like pretty normal pants and a ball cap. You don't have to fit the aesthetic of a lot of foraging content that's out there. A lot of it is very like cottagecore, sort of whimsical, fairy type stuff. And I love that aesthetic, and I'm slowly building a little fae outfit of my own, but you don't need it for foraging. Just wear whatever you're comfortable in, whatever's appropriate for being outside that day. And don't let things like the appearance of the foragers you see online stop you from enjoying foraging. Oh, and I also want to say about foraging is that it can be as hardcore or as casual as you like. In the past, I've done a few seasons of burn morel picking, and my max was 55 pounds in a day. And that is an athletic endeavor. But even just like casual mushroom picking in the backyard, we've got a good haul. And we didn't walk very far, and we didn't walk fast, but there was a lot of squatting, lunging, and bending. So I've worked up a sweat. I think my mom's worked up a sweat. No reply.
Well, I dressed appropriately.
She dressed appropriately to not work up a sweat mushroom picking. I wore a jacket. I got too hot. And then even after I took it off, I was still too hot. But it's a good way to get a little bit exercise at whatever level suits you. Enjoy being outside and get some very free, very tasty food. Before I get into sharing tips and tricks to help you learn how to forage or grow your foraging skills, as well as some very important do's and don'ts that could save you a tummy ache and help you enjoy foraging for years to come, I want to make an announcement about a special addition to the channel. I have a drone now. I'm so excited, and I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. It means so much to have your support over there. I love being able to share things in real time, as well as some behind the scenes, or just go a little deeper into things I'm thinking about and share my photos and that kind of stuff. So I've really enjoyed the community with Patreon, and really appreciate the encouragement as well as the financial support that allows me to continue investing in my channel and myself as a creator, and just kind of grow my videography repertoire. So for those that are curious, this is the DJI Mini 3 Pro. I started saving for a drone back in December, with the plan to wait until something new was announced, because the DJI Mini 2 had already been on the market for a couple years. So I didn't want to buy a drone that had already been on market for 2+ years. I know that technology changes pretty quick, and I figured if I just wait patiently, I would get something far superior, which I did. So I'm very stoked on that. And of course, the first thing I did when I got the drone, aside from fly it to the edge of its reception zone and back, was to go on Skillshare. And Skillshare is the sponsor for today's video. If you haven't heard of Skillshare, they're an online learning platform with thousands of courses available on a wide range of topics, from graphic design, videography, photography. There's tons of great leisure classes, sewing, illustration, you name it. There's so much, including self-care, which I like diving into from time to time. I've taken a few classes now on Skillshare about drone videography. One of my favorites was Introduction to Drone Videography by Wild Rabbit Productions. I really appreciated their knowledge and experience and having them share that with me through video classes, and it was just really, really helpful to learn a lot of different flight patterns and camera flight combinations to practice. So that's what you're seeing now, is some of the footage that I went out and did as part of the class project. And yeah, let me tell you, it is a lot better than the footage I filmed before I took classes on Skillshare. So I've had a great time on Skillshare over the last few months, just growing as a creator, developing my skill set, and it's really been great to give me the confidence to try new things and to feel supported in doing that. I love that all of their classes are ad-free, so you can stay focused, stay in the zone. If I get distracted these days, it might be hours till I come back to what I'm doing, so I love that there's no ads. There are new premium classes every single week, so there's always something new to learn. Skillshare has so much to offer, and I highly recommend it. So the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below can get their first month free when joining Skillshare. 1,000 people is a pretty big percentage of the people viewing this, so I can't encourage you enough to give it a try, see what they have to offer, see what you can learn, and yeah, happy learning. So a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. I've really appreciated their support over the last few months. And now on to the foraging fun. All right, well, I actually wanted to take you to a different spot to film this, full of ferns. It's really lush. I love it. It's one of my favorite spots back here. But there is a herd of elk that hangs out back here in the spring and fall. And right now they have some wee little babies, and they were actually hanging out in the area I was intending to go. And then I decided to go to a different place, and there was also elk there. So I just settled here on this place close to the backyard that's in the shade. So Frank is there relaxing. And my intention for this is to give you some tips and tricks and do's and don'ts to help you along your way learning to forage, because I feel like that is a lot more helpful than telling you what to forage. This is an international platform, and while most of you are in Canada and the US, you're all in different bioclimatic zones, different ecological niches, or living in various places around the world, or traveling to various places around the world. So I want to help you on your way to learn how to learn foraging. So I thought first I would share the resources I have used over the years to teach myself foraging, and it's these two books. Edible and Medicinal Plants of Canada by the publisher Lone Tree, and A Hip Pocket Guide to Western Mushrooms by David Aurora. It's called All That Rain Promises and More. This is the book I suggest to everyone who wants to learn to forage mushrooms. This has all of the most common Western mushrooms, but it's pretty applicable across North America. And the guy who wrote this book is very knowledgeable. He also wrote the thick ID book with thousands of species of fungi. And when it comes to fungi, the vast majority of species have never been identified. And I've actually found mushrooms that don't exist in that book and I can't ID online. So definitely don't go eating anything that isn't already identified, unless you're wanting to be like the toadstool tester, and who knows what kind of adventure you might be in for. So the reason I love this book so much is not only does it have all of the most common mushrooms, but it has these really handy flow charts to help you identify them front and back. So this one is for guild mushrooms and the one in the back is for not guild mushrooms, and it just walks you through a series of yes or no to help you narrow down the mushroom family, and then leads you to the page where you would find the mushrooms. And then in the book, it has a color photo of the mushroom, as well as key features, other features, where you find it, edibility, and notes. And in the notes, it will say if there's poisonous lookalikes. So it's really helpful. This is how I've learned all the mushrooms that I eat. I've either learned from the book or from people directly. So that is really handy. That is the mushroom resource I recommend for everyone. For everything else that's not mushrooms, I use Edible and Medicinal Plants of Canada. This is going to have the plants that are also in all boreal regions. All the boreal regions of the world are basically the exact same plants everywhere. So how I've gone about learning plants, the most helpful way, the way I suggest for people who want to learn, is to first of all read all the introductory pages. There's so much good information in these books. And then very importantly is to study the anatomy diagram of different types of plants, of trees, of flowering species, etc., so that you know the names of the parts of the plants when you're reading in the how to ID part and it's describing the different parts. Like, you want to know what those parts are so you can confirm if it's what's being described or not. And also knowing the different identifying parts of the plant will help you when you come across something you can't ID on your own. It will help you to take pictures that will actually be helpful for the person you want to help you. I cannot count the amount of time somebody has sent me a photo and said, what type of mushroom is this? And there's none of the identifying features in it for me to help them. So if people just take the time to learn the anatomy, it makes all of learning ID that much more helpful. So I've personally used books as my number one primary resource for learning how to forage. When I spent summers in the Yukon, I used a book called Boreal Herbal. It was really helpful. It had all the most common plants in the boreal, as well as how to make them into salves and tinctures and all that kind of stuff, and really awesome charts of all the different uses and properties. I've also used a book called California Foraging. So basically what you can do wherever you are is to search your location, your state, your country, your bioregion, plus foraging. And if there's books available, you should be able to find them, and any local bookstore can get those in for you. So I find books really helpful, but some other resources, there are many plant ID apps. I've never used any of them, so I can't recommend a specific one, but I'm sure if anyone who's watching has an app that they love and they find helpful, they will mention it in the comments below. But I personally feel like leaving edible foods up to an AI to determine if it's a plant you should be eating or not is not the safest route. I find what I like about foraging is it's such a self-empowering practice where I develop my knowledge base and I become more self-reliant, and I'm able to enjoy really tasty, really nutritious, or sometimes really kind of higher end foods for nothing more than my time. So that's a big part of foraging for me, is the self-reliance. And when you use an app to tell you what the plant is, you're not building that self-reliance. It can be a good tool while you're learning to kind of back up what you've figured it out to be or what you think it is. And another tool is there are groups on Facebook. In every region, there's Western mushrooms, there's, towns, like many different towns have their own foraging groups, and different regions, states, provinces, all of that have foraging groups. So you can find so much resources on Facebook by searching, but, huge but, it's a bunch of strangers on the internet. I'm a stranger on the internet, and you don't know what they know. You have no idea what their knowledge is. And I have seen people giving advice that is completely wrong. Absolutely, completely wrong. So I wouldn't use Facebook as a way to have other people tell you what the ideas. For the same reason, I would not suggest you use an app to solely rely on for identification. Instead, I would use the Facebook groups to see what other people are foraging in your area so you have an idea of what's around and what's in season, so you can educate yourself on those plants and go out and find it for yourself. So that is a really handy way to use the Facebook groups in a safer, more empowering way than just posting a picture and being like, what is this? So yeah, online groups, apps as backup sources, books, and other people you trust as primary sources. Now, when I decided I really wanted to start developing my skill set for foraging, I was completely overwhelmed. There's so many plants out there and so many things that are useful. Most things actually have a use either as food, as medicinal, or as like tool uses, so as structure or something like that. So it's amazing how much value can be found in the plant kingdom, which is very, very overwhelming. So the way I've approached it is, instead of thinking of something I want to pick and then trying to go out and specifically find it, just whenever I'm in nature, I pay attention to what's around me. And when something catches my eye that's a common plant, I will learn how to ID it and figure out what it is and figure out if I can use it as food or medicine or other. So that way I'm learning what is most common, most abundant, as well as what I'm going to be able to harvest with the least impact on the other animals that use that resource, as well as find things that, if other people are also foraging, aren't going to get over harvested. So something I like the idea of picking is wild ginger, but it's not very common, and I don't feel like it would be a responsible thing to pick in the region that I live. Like when I'm on the coast, there's wild ginger, but it's very rare, and so I don't go out in search of it. So for me personally, it's really, really important to forage in a responsible manner. I never want to take so much this year that it takes away from what I could harvest next year. I also don't want to negatively impact the animals that rely on these food sources as like their only food source. Like a bear is not going to go to the grocery store. If they did, they'd probably get shot. So we don't want to put them in a situation where we take all their food in the wild and then they have to resort to human sources, because that usually costs them their lives. And I know that humans are part of nature, and that I personally feel like I'm entitled to forage in the wild, but our population is quite a bit more than foraging could sustain, which is why we have agriculture. Also, agriculture is part of why our population is so big. So yes, it's our earth-given right to go and forage, but we do need to be mindful and respectful of the plants themselves, as well as the animals that rely on these food sources. And there's a couple ways that I go about doing that. One is to learn the reproductive cycle of the plant. So berries, they spread by seeds through our poop after we eat them. So actually digging cat holes when you're eating wild berries all the time is helpful to the plant spreading, and you can eat all the berries you want, and you're not going to reduce the berries for next year or the population of the plants. Pretty similar with mushrooms, that is the fruiting body of the plant. So picking mushrooms doesn't destroy the mushroom colonies if you do it properly, which in most cases is to just use a knife so you're not disrupting the mycelium. But other types of plants, like taking barks or leaves or other parts of the root structure, you're going to want to figure out exactly how that plant in particular reproduces, so you take only the amount that is sustainable. And then another big thing is to always keep in mind how many other people in your area are foraging. So the more you learn about foraging and the more you forage, you will start to see signs of other foragers. And that's also a great reason to be in your local foraging group, is so you have an idea of how many people are picking. But also keep in mind, not everyone participates in that kind of online stuff. So just kind of always expect that there's more foraging action going on that might be immediately obvious unless you're in really far off wild places, which is why I like to forage off trail, far away from parks and other civilized places. And when I walk off trail, I do it really lightly because I don't want to just go trample everything. So those have been some of the ways that I've been able to feel like I'm not taking away from my future ability to forage. And so one example I want to give on this topic is wild roses. People love to forage wild roses, but the rose hip, which ripens in the fall, is a really, really good autumn food source for many birds and small creatures. And so if when you're harvesting the petals, you take all the petals or you take all the petals and the hip, then that hip isn't there in the fall for the other creatures. And so when I forage wild rose, I just take 2 or 3 of the petals and leave a couple petals on every flower to attract pollinators. So the rose hip gets pollinated and then it grows and develops. And then there's that food source for many birds and creatures that are preparing for winter. So I grew up eating wild berries. There was a few of the most common ones that my parents taught us, like huckleberries, blackberries, wild strawberries, thimbleberries, those types of things that were abundant on the island where I grew up. So I've always eaten some wild food, but it has been for the past 8 years that I've made foraging a regular practice where I'm every year trying to add a few new things to my repertoire. And as I travel through different regions, I pay attention to what is abundant and learn how to identify it. So I do have a few other books that are not specifically edible and medicinal foods, but just for plant ID in the different areas that I am, so I can kind of cross-reference and gather more information. So I want to share a story that is a foraging fail. There have been times where I've been too eager to find something to put in my mouth, and one time it was a mushroom that I thought was a weird oyster looking mushroom. It ended up not being an oyster mushroom. It was indeed a western jack-o'-lantern, which is toxic. And I didn't just eat one, I ate like 10 of them, and I had a really, really rough night. I was completely delirious, drenched in sweat, and just vomiting, and it was just an absolute mess. And unfortunately, I was so out of it that I couldn't stop Frank from eating my vomit. So he ended up eating my vomit. He ended up getting sick. It was horrible. But what is possibly the worst part of it is that other people saw me pick the mushroom and eat it, and then they didn't see that I got sick. So they made the incorrect assumption that I knew what I was doing, which at that time I didn't. And they went out and picked and ate the same mushroom, and they all got sick. So monkey see, monkey do is a horrible way to learn foraging. Only eat what you're absolutely certain with identifying, and never eat something because you see somebody else eat it. There could be very subtle differences that are the difference between life and death, especially with mushrooms. One of the most poisonous mushrooms out there looks like the common mushroom you would eat from the grocery store. So you want to be really careful with that. A lot of the mushrooms I eat, like chanterelles, morels, lobster mushrooms, as well as oyster mushrooms, which I don't confuse now, are very common, very easy to identify, and have not poisonous lookalike. So I absolutely encourage everyone who's interested in learning foraging to start learning foraging, but understand that it is an endless process that once you start, you will spend the rest of your life learning new things to forage and learning new uses for wild food. And so don't rush yourself. Allow yourself to learn at whatever pace is sustainable for you so you don't get burnt out and you don't get overwhelmed. I would say 1 or 2 items per hike or per week, like nice and slow and sustainable. And as the seasons change, different things will catch your eye and come into season. So then you can learn those. So there's no point trying to learn how to identify a wild rose in the middle of winter. It's easier to find when it's blooming. It stands out. You got these nice pink flowers and they're really obvious. So rose is an easy one because it's thorny and it doesn't have any poisonous lookalikes that I know, but it's always best to check your own resources because every area, like I said, is different. Well, I don't want to ramble on too much about this, and I can hear the elk heading this way, so I should probably wrap this up. Hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully you feel a little bit more confident to go out and to learn foraging. I love it. It's super empowering, and it really just centers me and puts me in the moment, and I always forget about everything else that's going on in my life or in the world when I'm foraging. I get so in the zone. I love picking, and it's amazing. So yes, happy foraging, and we'll see you soon.